today I'm going to be talking about my experience getting my first wheelchair. I thought it could be quite an interesting post to make and it might be able to help a few people, whether you're considering getting a wheelchair or even if you have a wheelchair, it might be interesting to hear someone else's story. I got my first wheelchair when I was 11. Realistically, I probably should have had a wheelchair sooner than that, but I didn't meet the criteria to be able to get a wheelchair on the NHS and we couldn't afford to buy our own wheelchair. I got my wheelchair when I was starting secondary school. For the first term of school, I didn't have my wheelchair. I found it quite difficult walking from class to class, and at lunch times and breaks I couldn't really hang out with anyone because I wouldn't be able to walk that far. But yeah, wheelchairs take quite a while to come. I think my first wheelchair took probably about 6 months to come, which doesn't seem that long, but if you're dependent on a wheelchair and restricted to what you can do, then 6 months is quite a while. I remember someone came to my house and they measured me for the wheelchair. They took quite a lot of measurements and yeah, it was a bit awkward because they were measuring me and I didn't really know what to do. But yeah, then they explained to me that I would be getting a manual wheelchair, which is what I wanted anyway at the time. And I think they asked me to pick from the colours, what colour to have the wheelchair. I picked pink at the time because I was a little bit obsessed with pink. But I think the other colours were pink, black, yellow, blue and green. So there was quite a few colours. So once I had been measured, I then had to obviously wait for the wheelchair to be made because it was a custom wheelchair. If you get a wheelchair privately, then it's a bit quicker, but because I got it through the NHS, it took quite a while. When I got my first wheelchair, the same people that measured me came to my house and gave me the wheelchair. They made me sit in the wheelchair and they adjusted everything so that it would fit correctly, like the foot plates, the armrest, the seat belt, and I think that's it. They then showed me how to move myself with my wheelchair and how to turn around and stuff like that. They told me not to do any wheelies, but obviously as soon as they left, I tried to do a wheelie. I think the biggest mistake is telling someone that they shouldn't do something because it was literally all I could think about the whole appointment. I was nervous and excited to get my new wheelchair. I was excited because I would have so much more freedom and I wouldn't rely on someone to push me anymore. And I wouldn't really need assistance if I wanted to go somewhere. There would just be a lot more freedom, especially at school. But I was also nervous about what other people would think. And also I'd never been in a wheelchair before or used any mobility aids, so I was a bit nervous about that side of it as well. I remember taking my wheelchair to school for the first time the next day. I was really excited to show people my wheelchair. People were actually excited as well, but then after probably about a few months of having the wheelchair, I noticed that people's attitudes towards me changed. They would basically judge me based on my wheelchair. So I got my wheelchair at 11. Before I turned 11, I was walking around and stuff like that. So I had kind of the experience of how people treated you before using a mobility aid compared to after. And people are a lot more judgmental once your disability becomes more visible, I would say. But over a few months, probably about a few years to be honest, I started becoming more confident using my wheelchair and just ignoring what people think because, to be honest, their opinion is irrelevant. There is nothing to be ashamed of using a mobility aid. If it makes your life easier, then there's literally no problem. I feel like people just say anything. They just can't keep their mouth shut. They just have the urge to say something, whether it's offensive or not. Also, for some reason, when I got my wheelchair, people started thinking that I was deaf or neurodivergent. I found that a lot. I don't really know why. I guess people associate mobility problems with also having a cognitive disability. I'm not really sure how those things go together, but even now, after 7 years of having a wheelchair, I still notice that. I guess it comes from a lack of understanding and like awareness about disabilities and wheelchairs in general. Eventually I grew out of my first wheelchair and I needed to get another one. When I got my second wheelchair, the process was a bit easier. I didn't really have to adjust to using the wheelchair. It was just like more practical for me to get a bigger one because like I didn't fit in my old one anymore. This time I chose a black wheelchair. I didn't go for any pink wheels or anything like that. If I can find pictures, I'll put a picture of my pink wheelchair on the screen. When I got my black wheelchair, I was a lot more, I would say, confident and comfortable using a mobility aid. Didn't really feel judged, and if I did, I didn't care. When I got my black wheelchair, I also started decorating my wheelchair because it made me more confident using it, and yeah, I just thought it was pretty cool. I think one time I done rainbow wheels. Then I decorated my wheelchair for prom as well, put flowers on the wheels, and more recently for Christmas I added fairy lights to my wheels. I'll put pictures on the screen if I can find them as well. I think it's pretty cool to decorate your mobility aids because it just adds a bit of a personal touch, and you know, they feel like medical items. Like mobility aids, they can be fashionable as well. As much as like habilitation officers and physiotherapists, they don't really approve of people decorating their mobility aids, but like there's literally not really anything wrong with it. I think they just see that mobility aids are like a medical device, they shouldn't be fashionable or whatever, but you know, it's fine. As I got older, I found that my manual wheelchair didn't really suit my needs anymore. I needed something else. So then I got my first electric wheelchair. I chose to upgrade to an electric wheelchair because pushing my manual wheelchair was hurting my hands a lot. I couldn't really go long distances, and also I was older at that point, so I wanted to like travel more independently and stuff like that with my friends, and my manual wheelchair just didn't really accommodate that. When getting an electric wheelchair, I would say the process is a lot more different. It's a lot more invasive as well, I would say. Like it requires like a lot more effort and like information, and it's just a bit more intense. So like I would be prepared for that pressure. Before you can even get an electric wheelchair, your house has to have 2 ramps. So if you have a garden, you have to have a ramp out to the garden, and you also have to have a ramp into the house. I think this is just a safety thing, like if there was a fire, how you would evacuate and stuff like that. Sadly, you also have to lie about your needs a little bit. I wasn't allowed an electric wheelchair because I could walk around the house, so I did have to lie and say that I used my manual wheelchair inside the house. It is really annoying to have to lie about your needs, especially when you're like portraying yourself as more disabled than you actually are, but sometimes you just have to do it to like get what you need because the system is broken. So this was a longer process because we didn't have ramps on the house at the time, so we had to get ramps before I could even be assessed or measured for the electric wheelchair, which took a while obviously because it's building work. And then when the building work finally started, it turns out that the ramp, I'm pretty sure there was something wrong with it, like they measured it wrong or they didn't have the parts. So then it took even longer to get the ramp and be measured for the wheelchair, which was really annoying. Once we got ramps on the house, we could actually start the process of getting the electric wheelchair, which is a lot more intense to a manual wheelchair. To start with, I had to have a basic eye test. It wasn't anything intense. He basically just pulled a book out of my bookcase and held it a distance away from me to see if I could read what was on the cover of the book. I have no idea how I passed this test because I am partially sighted, but luckily he pulled a book out of the bookcase, which probably had the biggest font. So that was lucky for me, I guess. But yeah, it's not really anything intense, it's not even accurate, because like I say, I'm partially sighted, so realistically I probably shouldn't have an electric wheelchair, but now I use a cane with my wheelchair, so yeah, it's a lot more safe. Then I had to organise a driving test. You actually have to have a driving test to qualify for an electric wheelchair, or at least that's how it is in my borough. I know some people who didn't have to have a driving test for an electric wheelchair, but I did. So they basically bring an electric wheelchair to my house, which is why we needed the ramps on the house, because like they couldn't bring the electric wheelchair into my house without the ramps. Then I got in the electric wheelchair for the first time. He asked me some basic questions to check my like safety and spatial awareness and stuff. Some of them I think were trick questions, because he asked me what would I do if the wheelchair didn't start, and I said push the on button, and he just started laughing at me. But like, what else are you supposed to do if the wheelchair like isn't on? Like, isn't that how you turn the wheelchair on? I don't know. I think that was a trick question, but you know. I don't know, I found that man a bit annoying, because I was doing the driving test and then he told me to like go around the house and then stop when I get to him. So I stopped when I got to him, like just before him, before running his feet over, obviously. And then, because I stopped a bit away from him, he then kept telling me to come closer and closer and closer. And then the footplate of the wheelchair hit his trousers, and I think that he was going to give me a mark for that. But there was 2 people with him, and the other guy had told him to let me off, which was good. But yeah, that was a bit annoying, because, I don't know, I just felt like he was being a bit unfair, to be honest. Then I got measured for my electric wheelchair, which was pretty much the same process as the manual wheelchair. They then put my measurements into the system, and they decided what brand of wheelchair and what make would suit my needs best. They then asked me if I wanted anything like added on to the wheelchair. Personally, I chose to add a rise to the wheelchair because I'm quite small, which basically allows my wheelchair to go up and down so that I can reach stuff, and also it allows the wheelchair to recline as well. Haven't actually used the recline for anything practical yet, but I suppose it's a bit of a cool party trick. A lot of people find it fascinating. It's also cool that I can like rise up and like make eye contact with people. If they annoy me, I like to do that because I'm a weirdo. There was also other things you could add onto the wheelchair, but it's worth remembering that the add-ons do cost money. The basic electric wheelchair is free, but if you add like add-ons or wanted to customise the colour of the wheelchair, it did cost a lot more. So I just got the standard black wheelchair. Wasn't really bothered about the colour either. He did try and trick me into getting the colour, but it was literally like £150 just for the colour. And because I wasn't really bothered about it, I just got the black wheelchair because that is the colour that I did want anyway. So yeah. The rise for the wheelchair was also expensive. I think it was like £900 or £1,000, which is expensive. But I had finished growing by the time I got my electric wheelchair, so it wasn't like I was going to get another electric wheelchair after that, so it was worth the money. However, if you're still growing and you can like cope without some of these add-ons, I would suggest waiting until later, because like it is expensive, especially if you don't get funding. But I'm pretty sure there are grants available if you did like need them adjustments for whatever reason. Some of the adjustments were pretty cool, like you could add headlights and I think there was indicators and stuff like that. You could basically just customise the whole wheelchair, but like I said, it all costs money, and if you don't need it, you may as well save your money because it's not cheap. Then after all that was done, I guess it took about probably an hour and a half to like measure me and then do all the add-ons and check that I was happy with the wheelchair. So yeah, it did take quite a while compared to the manual wheelchair. The manual wheelchair probably only took about half an hour or 45 minutes to get measured and like choose the wheelchair. But yeah, this one was a bit more intense, but it does make sense because obviously it is an electric wheelchair, not a manual wheelchair. There is more to it. I can't actually remember how long it took to get the electric wheelchair from being measured. It was quite a while, like compared to the manual wheelchair. I think it was about 8 or 9 months. I'm not really sure. I'll have a look, and if I do find out the exact timing, then I'll put it on the screen, because it is helpful to know like how long it does take for an electric wheelchair. Again, if you go private, you can get the wheelchair sooner, but it is like over 10 grand. Like my wheelchair now, I'm pretty sure it's like 9,000 if I was to buy it without being on the NHS and without having funding. So it is like pretty expensive. And unfortunately some people can't afford to buy a wheelchair and stuff like that. So yeah. I wanted my electric wheelchair for going into college. Unfortunately, my wheelchair wasn't ready for like a month or 2 into college, so I did have to use my manual wheelchair, which that was quite hard because college was like a much bigger environment to school. I was allowed to go out at lunch, but like I couldn't go out because I physically couldn't push myself all the way to the shops, because obviously a manual wheelchair is a lot more intense on your hands than people make out, especially if you already have hand or wrist weakness. It is a lot. So I did have gloves with grips, but it didn't like help a lot. It did for short distances, but it wouldn't help if I wanted to go to the shops or the park or just like leave the building in general. Then when my electric wheelchair was ready, I had to schedule an appointment. To get my electric wheelchair, I had to come and collect it. They did deliver to your house, but it would take longer, so me and my dad decided that it would be better to go and collect the wheelchair. The place wasn't actually that far from my house either, so it just made sense to collect the wheelchair. Then I could start using it and just be more independent. When I went to collect the wheelchair, there was quite a long wait, and then we got called into a room where my new wheelchair was, and it was still in the bag and stuff, so we had to like unwrap it and stuff. Then I got in the wheelchair. It was a weird feeling because it was a lot more different to the manual wheelchair, and it was a lot more comfortable as well. So yeah, that was good. He then went through all the boring stuff about how to charge the wheelchair, how to turn it on, what to do if there was a problem and stuff like that. Also, it's worth knowing, if you get an electric wheelchair and you want to use it outside the house, which most people do because that's the whole point of it, then you do actually need wheelchair insurance to be able to like use it outside the house. It's almost like a car, I guess. You do have to insure it, because if you do run someone's foot over, and like you will break their foot if you run it over. So yeah, you do need insurance. Mostly for your sake and the person's sake, because you know, you don't want to get into that drama. Because I will admit, sometimes you do run people over, like by accident, like if someone's just standing behind you and you're not aware of them, just stuff like that. Thankfully I've never actually broken someone's foot, but I will admit I have run people over. So yeah, I thought the insurance was a bit of a waste of time at the beginning, but yeah, now I see that there is actually a purpose to it and it is worth getting. Also, I just renewed my wheelchair insurance actually, and I noticed on the document I got after, there was basically the wheelchair equivalent to AA, that if I broke down, I could call someone and they would come and collect me. Like, that's just really funny to me. Like, imagine your wheelchair breaking down and you just like call the wheelchair AA. Like, that's so weird. But I guess it's useful. I haven't had to use it yet, but like if I do, then I'll make another video on that because I think it's quite cool. But yeah, he explained to me what would happen if the battery went low, how to change the speed, how to go up and down and how to recline and stuff like that. He then made me drive around. He did give it to me on speed 5, which is full speed, and I didn't realise at the time, so I just pressed the control stick and I went flying forwards. So yeah, before you do that, check what speed it's on. That was definitely a learning experience for me. Now I do just drive on speed 5, which he did tell me not to do, but I did get used to it, and now any other speed feels way too slow and it makes me rage so much. So yeah, I do go on speed 5 now, but I can control myself, so I can emergency stop and stuff like that. But yeah, he did make me do a drive around the building and the place to check that everything worked and I knew how to use it before taking me home with it. We then had the trouble of getting it in the car because we didn't actually have our wheelchair accessible vehicle at the time. We did have a wheelchair accessible vehicle, but we did have to buy a ramp to put on it, if you know what I mean. It wasn't adapted for a wheelchair yet because them things take a lot of time. That was a bit of a drama because the wheelchair wouldn't go in the car, and then eventually the man came out and he got another ramp and he helped us put the wheelchair in the car. So that's that panic over. Basically, the problem with the ramp we had, it was too steep, so the wheelchair couldn't actually go up it, and the ramp that the man gave us was a lot longer, so the slope wasn't as steep, so the wheelchair could go up it with less problems. But yeah, getting my electric wheelchair was a lot better. I did notice that I had a lot more freedom. I could go to the shop myself, I could hang out with friends, I could now use public transport without anyone coming with me and stuff like that. So it was a really good experience. I would say it's definitely worth getting an electric wheelchair if you can get one, if you qualify for one, and if you do find a manual wheelchair a bit hard to push. I know that manual wheelchairs are okay for some people, but NHS wheelchairs, they tend to be quite heavy, so they are harder to push. But I know people that have got custom wheelchairs, they find them a lot easier to push because they're made with more lightweight materials, and yeah, they're just better. So it depends, I guess, whether you think that you'd be able to push a manual wheelchair if it was custom made, not on the NHS, or if you still think you would benefit from an electric wheelchair, because I guess a manual wheelchair, it is about £3,000 depending on what wheelchair you get. So yeah, if you're getting an electric wheelchair and you add all the add-ons, it probably would be about £3,000 if you did get all the add-ons and all of that stuff. So yeah, it depends what one you think would work better for you. Also, I did have to adjust to using an electric wheelchair as well. I found again that people would treat me differently compared to me using my manual wheelchair to my electric wheelchair. I found that people just assumed that I definitely couldn't walk because I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, and people don't really understand what that means. But yeah, now again I've got used to it. I don't really care what other people think. That's none of my business. It's a waste of time even giving them the space to be annoying. So yeah, I don't really care anymore. But I thought this video might be interesting for some of you. I know some of you on my Instagram, you have asked me my experience with getting a wheelchair, so I thought I would make a more in-depth video. If you have any questions, I would be open to making a part 2. So yeah, let me know what you think. And also let me know your experience of getting a wheelchair and if you're considering one. Also, I know the process of getting a wheelchair is different from country and even to borough. So yeah, I'd be interested in hearing your guys' experience with getting a wheelchair. So yeah, let me know.